We are almost 2 years into the war in Ukraine and approaching 138 days into the war in Israel between the Israeli Defense Forces and the Palestinians and Hamas, who of course have integrated themselves amongst the civilians in Gaza, Palestine, and no doubt Rafah soon too. All of this is taking place whilst today MPs in Westminster, MPs in Parliament are voting on potential ceasefire amendments. There's been a lot of discussion around the semantics of these motions, whether it be the Labour amendment, which does call for an immediate ceasefire but for humanitarian reasons only, or whether to vote for the SNP motion, which calls for a immediate ceasefire for a prolonged period of time for a cessation of the hostilities, not just for a humanitarian corridor to be opened. All of this is taking place while civilian deaths rack up in Gaza, up to 29,000 now killed and almost 70,000 injured. And that is why, to me, a lot of this discussion today in the UK is borderline disrespectful, actually, as it is representative of the Westminster Games in Parliament, electioneering now in, of course, an election year, whilst we approach a critical juncture in the war where there is a real matter, a true matter of life and death. The Westminster Games over which motion is actually called. Sir Lindsay Hoyle has been criticised for calling the Labour amendment and allowing a vote on that in the opposition today in Parliament, which of course was just meant to be for the SNP. As I say, all of this is at a critical juncture in the war where recently we have seen up to 1.5 million people move south into Rafah, where Israel has promised to invade shortly. Rafah, of course, is normally home to just about 170,000 residents, so it is massively overpopulated, and Israel has promised to invade there soon. Meanwhile, much of the West is beginning to roll back on their initial heavy-handed support for Israel. We have seen the USA, in a huge shift of policy and position, call for a cessation of hostilities. That is rare. The US holds the most influence and is a kind of global leader for the West in support for Israel. But also we have seen Labour now calling in what is also a shift and U-turn in policy. Labour have been struggling to put their thumb on a clear policy that would unite the party, but we have seen them U-turn and now also, like the SNP, call for an immediate ceasefire. But the catch is for humanitarian reasons, not solely for peace reasons. And perhaps most interestingly, we have seen Prince William wade into the argument a few days ago, saying he is shocked by the scale of death and destruction in Gaza, effectively putting pressure on Israel to turn down or tune down their response, which much of the West now considers to be disproportionate to the attacks on October the 7th. Of course, all of this pressure on Israel and all of this pressure for a ceasefire would only allow Hamas to regroup and reunite. This is, of course, the Hamas that is dedicated to destroy Israel completely. We also must not forget that negotiations for peace and for long-lasting peace, for a two-state solution, which I see to be the best solution, negotiations are likely taking place behind the scenes. We might not be able to see them, but I'm not sure it is fair of us to completely disrupt them. So we must allow these negotiations, which are inevitably taking place behind the scenes, to continue to take place. And I don't think any form of ceasefire, no matter if it's for peace or solely for humanitarian reasons, is possible until all the Israeli hostages are released by Hamas.